Hey everybody, good evening. Happy day after Halloween. Welcome to, what is this, week 9, I guess? Week 9. How's everybody doing? Can you hear my voice? Let's do a sound check. Good. Thank you, Schweidi. Very good. Tonight, the topic is... Cool, thank you, Parmar. Tonight, the topic is GUI. GUI. Short for, what is it? Graphical User Interface. So that's windows, knobs, buttons, faders, all the fun stuff that everyone seems to really enjoy. I think we may not actually need the server for a while. I think we will make some sound eventually, but the objective tonight is to get through the basics so that everybody's comfortable making a window with you know, graphical controllers on it, knobs, buttons, etc., changing their attributes, retrieving their attributes, setting their attributes, and using them to do stuff. I've also got this Korg nano control over here. So I'd also like to get, you know, moving one of these faders to actually move a slider on screen. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll try to get through as much as we can. And we'll see where we go. So the corresponding tutorial is, I believe it's 14. Let me check on that. Yeah, that is something else. Oh, hang on. Oh yeah, 14 GUI. So do check that out. It's a nice condensed version of what we're going to cover tonight. Maybe some extra stuff in there. All right, a couple of help documents that are also useful. I think if we just go to GUI, there is, this is actually a class. This isn't really a guide or a walkthrough or anything, but it does include at the top some see also links. So there's list of Gui classes and introduction to GUI. So I would start with introduction to GUI. And this gives you sort of a general description. GUI starts with a window. You need a window on which to place your various GUI objects. And then there's the idea of views, which is the abstract superclass of all GUI elements, like knobs and buttons and faders and sliders and whatever. So there's actually a class called view, which we never really use directly. Very rarely will we use view directly. It's kind of like how node is a superclass of synth and group. So node provides the framework, but we never actually say node.new. We just use its subclasses. So that's sort of the same idea with view. There's slider, button, knob, text, view. There's a lot. There's a lot of GUI classes. Everything you could ever really need to build a nice GUI interface. So let's go back to introduction to GUI for a second. That's sort of a pretty succinct introduction. There's a window that you create, and then you put views on it by creating new instances of view subclasses. And then there are a lot of, you know, examples here. The idea of positioning and resizing, customizing appearance, colors, fonts, all useful stuff here. And the other class, sorry, not the other class, the other file worth looking at is list of GUI classes. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Right, so there's a few easy classes at the beginning, which I don't really use too much. I actually find them to be a little burdensome. Like they're meant to be sort of easy versions of their corresponding GUI element, but they have like too many features for me. Here's where I want you to take a look. Windows and views. So there's the idea of window. There's the view and various things. Composite view can be useful. Button, pop-up menu, otherwise known as a drop-down menu. Slider, a range slider, which instead of picking one point along a continuum, has a minimum and maximum within a continuum. A two-dimensional slider, a field where you can enter text, a list of things. Static text is like the most basic text element. A number box, that's pretty useful. A drag sync, this is a place where you can drag stuff and make stuff happen. All of these are necessarily kind of abstract, but that's the way we want it so that we can use them in flexible ways. Sound file view is a little complex, but it can be very useful. It's a way of actually looking at the waveform of an audio file. So yeah, why don't we just get started? Doc, over here, please. Thank you. Right, so GUI starts with a window. Let's make a window. W equals window dot new. Very predictable, right? Wham, we made a window. Where is it? It's nowhere. It exists, but it is invisible by default. Why? I don't know. I guess that's maybe can be or might be a useful thing to do, but that's fine. We've made a window. W is a window, so we can use the method front. And now these are gonna pop up off screen for whatever reason. Can I get it to pop up on screen? I bet I can, but what's happening is they're showing up on my laptop down here, and then I can just drag them up here. And if you're following along and you have SuperCollider open, you can go ahead and just run these two lines, and you should see a window pop up. Oh, and SuperCollider is cross-platform. It's Mac, Windows, and Linux. But if there's any part of the language where we're possibly going to run into some cross-platform differences, maybe some not so insignificant ones, it's probably going to be here. And we go to the let's see, the GUI, it was the list of GUI classes. Depending on what operating system you're running, you have a particular GUI kit. A GUI kit, which is active. Cocoa GUI, Swing GUI, Qt GUI, and there's a redirect system in place. So if you're using the Qt GUI system, like if I say GUI.kit, no, current, I think. Yeah, I can see what GUI kit I'm currently using. It's Qt GUI, but that doesn't mean I should go ahead and use QWindow. I could say W equals QWindow dot front, and I've got a window. It's down here. Right? Whoa! I clicked the wrong thing. I grabbed OBS by accident. Here's my window. But the problem here is that if this code is no longer has lost a sense of portability. So if I bring this over to somebody else's computer and they're using Swing GUI, this won't work. 'Cause I think if I type, you know, JSC window, I get class not defined. So the bottom line is you want to use the generic names, which is why I originally did W equals window dot new and then W dot front, because that you know, the interpreter comes across window dot new and says, okay, so let me check the current GUI kit. We're using Qt GUI, so I'm going to give you a Q window. So this is what makes the GUI area cross-platform. So you always want to use the generic names. Always use. Don't ever use any of these. Just use the ones in the left column here. Button, slider, etc. Okay. Right. We've lost our window. Let's make it again. Here we go. So you can actually string these. Okay. No, and I do this in my tutorial as well. I type over here, and what happens is this window becomes the frontmost, and then this one here just hides in the background, and you know, it's kind of annoying. So Windows and views and all sorts of GUI things have attributes, and Windows have something called an attribute called always on top. And if we just evaluate this, we get false. This is a Boolean indicating whether the window will always float on top regardless of whether it's in focus or not. And it's false. That's okay because we can set it equal to true. And here's our window. And now, no matter where I click, this window is always on top, which is nice because it allows us to look at it and mess around with it and do things to it while typing code without having it disappear into the background. If I run this code again, I get another window. And run it again, I get another window. And the problem here, which is a problem that we've run into multiple times, we've done it with synths, we've done it with, it happens all the time. You know, we're assigning a global variable to something and doing things to it, and then we use the same global variable to make a new instance. So this was W, now W refers to this, and now W refers to this. So if we say w.close, only the most recent one disappears, and we can't say w.close here. That doesn't work. But we get, you know, it remembers that it's a window. It's returning the instance of the window, but it's not closing it because these are no longer accessible through a variable. So there's a class method, window.closeAll, which is just useful for closing all the windows. Yeah, this is what I was half anticipating, is that there are, I mean, these kits are not completely interchangeable sometimes. So, I mean, I think that's, what do you get when you return GUI.current, Jake? I would assume it's swing GUI, I think. Yeah, I think we'll run into some discrepancies. Qt GUI, oh, but it doesn't work. Well, this is one of the more popular topics on the listserv. It's just people saying, you know, this isn't working for that, or I don't know. It's a little unfortunate that it's not more uniform, but I think I hope that you'll find that the basic functionality is consistent. Anyway, you know, we can work this out tomorrow in class. So a lot of things sort of as multiple statements ending with semicolons. It kind of gets a little clouded, you know. It's I mean, it's fine, you can do it this way, but most methods that apply to windows and views return the instance of the window or the view itself, which means we can just string a bunch of messages together. For example, we can just do window.new.front. And there it is. And I think we could also do window.new.front.alwaysOnTop equals true. And here's our window, and it's always on top. You know, that said, you don't want to just string everything together as a single line. So sometimes, you know, you might make a clump here and say window.new and then new line without a semicolon, because SuperCollider is going to ignore the white space. You know, this way it's maybe a little bit, I think this is sort of the most readable way you can do it. W is a new window, move it to the front, and always on top. And there's an alternate syntax for setting an attribute, which instead of equal, you know, dot attribute equals the value, you can do dot attribute underscore, and then in parentheses, the value. And this syntax allows you to concatenate more methods. So I think we can then do something like, is this gonna work? Background color dot rand. Yeah. Ooh. Now, this works because the syntax allows us to chain another method here. If we do this, but always on top true, this, it's like this actually gets evaluated first, and SuperCollider tries to set always on top equal to whatever this returns, but that's going to return garbage because true doesn't understand background. But this syntax, yeah, so if we evaluate this, we get the same we get the same method. We did get a new window in the front, but it got choked up at always on top, so that doesn't work. But if we use the alternate syntax of setting an attribute, that works just fine. Okay, so there are lots and lots of attributes. But let's, okay, so we haven't actually, we've just been going with the default arguments for .new. And as you know, when we say, you know, signosc.ar, we don't just leave it there and put a semicolon. We open up some parentheses and we specify things about the signosc, what frequency, what phase. And this is the same situation with window.new. We want to say, where does the window go, and how big is it, and does it have a title in its menu bar and stuff like that. And hey Beetle, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. So window.new accepts 6 arguments. Name, which is the word that appears in the title bar. So notice my window now says hello at the top. That's very nice. Next is probably the most important of these 6, which is bounds. Let's look at the help file for window. Bounds expects an instance of a class called rect, R-E-C-T, which is short for rectangle, which is an abstract, the abstract idea of a rectangle, so let's look at the help file for rect. It is a rectangle, exactly what we'd expect it to be. And when we do rect.new, we provide a pixel value for the left of the rectangle, a pixel value for the top, a pixel value for the width, and a pixel value for the height. So you can imagine a rectangle anywhere on the screen. The upper left has a set of coordinates, a pair of coordinates telling it where that upper left corner is, and then a width and a height. And that's all we need to specify where it goes. So let me see, I think, well, at least on my version of SuperCollider, my OS, it's going to treat my combination of displays. My TV where I'm using to stream is up here. My laptop is below. So let's do some experimenting. Rect.new, and let's just try 0, 0, 500, 100. And it's all the way down in the bottom left corner. So let me try, I think when you're using rect for Windows, it actually treats this as from the bottom of the screen. Let's try 1000. Hey, there we go. We're getting closer. Let's close that. And let's nudge it over by 500 pixels. Look at that. All right. So we can do, here we go. Maybe we'll make a new one, which is just let's do 1200 pixels. So there's that. Make a new one, 14 up. We're having fun already. Look at all this. We're making windows. Okay. Let's just take a look at the window help file again, see if there's anything else of particular use. Oh, but these first two, you know, arguments for window.new, they're usually enough. I don't find myself often using the others, but the third is a Boolean, true or false, whether or not the window is resizable, whether the window has a border, and if you set this to false, then the menu bar will be gone, and the title will be gone, and the close button will be gone as well. So you won't have a way of closing it. So if we do default, this is true, so we can resize it all we want. And note also that w.bounds returns a rect, and it's the rect corresponding to the location of this window. So if I move it down and run this again, we get a different rect. Now it's this many pixels over, this many pixels up from the bottom, but it's the same size. And if I make it real small, now it's a really small rect for the background of the window. I set this to false. I cannot, try as I might, resize it. I just don't get the little arrow to resize it. It's not possible. So it's stuck the way it is. And if I set the next argument, border, to be false, we just get this this rectangle that we can't get rid of. It's in front. Oh no, there's no close button, right? So we have to do w.close to get rid of it. Or you can do window.close all. And then server, this is a dummy argument to provide compatibility, and a scroll boolean indicating whether the window will scroll. I usually just do the first two arguments, give it a title, or maybe I'll just give it a blank string if I don't care about a title, and then specify the bounds, just like that. Let's make it 400, 400, and push it over a little bit. Maybe so no matter which way you slice it, you know, making GUI objects, because you can't, you know, well, it involves some degree of pixel hunting, no matter which way you look at it, which makes it at first quite a bit slower than making GUI in something like MaxMSP, where you can literally just create objects, drag them around, and arrange them wherever you want, and not have to do it with code. But I think if you're clever about it, you can make GUIs really quickly in SuperCollider too. Oh, and there's also class methods, window dot screen bounds, and this returns a rect corresponding to the screen on which this window lives. So my display here is 1440 by 900 pixels, and you can use this information to calculate where the center of the screen is. And this also makes it portable. So if you move it to somebody else's computer, window.screenBounds might return something else. So you can say window.screenBounds.width to get the width of your screen, and height to get the height. And you can divide that by 2 to get half the height, and so on. So a lot of options there. Right. There's a full screen. You can make a window full screen. I think you can also minimize a window. Let's see. Ooh, there it goes. And then can we unminimize it? Yes, we can. Here it comes. Oop. So lots of fun possibilities there. And just one more fun thing before we actually start plunking GUI objects onto this window. W.bounds. Remember the set, you can either say equals a new rect, or you can say underscore rect. Say, so where is it now? Right now it's there. 900, 1200, 400, 400, of course, because I didn't move it. So let's set it to rect 900 plus rrand minus 1010, and we'll put these on in a clump of code. 1200 plus some random value, and we'll keep it the same size. So now, boop, 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 there it goes. And then we could do something really stupid, like make a routine, inf.do, make sure to provide a wait time, and play this routine. But we've run into a very important error. Let's read what this error says. Why couldn't we do this? You know, what did we do wrong? New routine, inf.do, wait time, and play, right? And the error says, error Qt. You cannot use this Qt functionality in the current thread. Try scheduling on app clock instead. And this is one of those errors where it's not a syntax error. It's not like you forgot a semicolon. This you need a little bit of extra assistance deciphering this. And judging from the error message, it seems like it might be specific to working in the Qt GUI kit. I don't know. But if you ever encounter this message, which you will if you're on Mac, I'm pretty confident about that. There are 3 clocks in SuperCollider. There is system clock, which is the most accurate. It's the highest priority clock. This is for scheduling like sound events that need to be sample accurate, need to happen at an exact point in time. There's tempo clock, which I believe is equally accurate, but it thinks in terms of beats rather than seconds, so you can give it an arbitrary tempo. And then there's app clock, which is the lowest priority clock. And so it's basically like, things, if you schedule stuff on app clock, don't expect it to happen at exactly the right time. It will happen, but it just defers to higher priority things. And as you can see, system clock is more accurate, but cannot call GUI primitives. But app clock can, I think system clock tells, yeah, system clock is more accurate than app clock, but cannot call GUI primitives. So anytime you are scheduling using a clock, something which creates or modifies or interacts with GUI objects, in this case, a window, we can't use tempo clock or system clock. And I believe that is the default when you play a routine. When you play a routine, let's see, where's the play message here? Clock. Yes. So when you play a routine, it is I assume the default tempo clock, an instance of tempo clock called tempo clock.default. And we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to schedule something on tempo clock with GUI stuff. So instead of playing, instead of just saying play semicolon, we open up the parentheses for routine.play. Whoops. And we say, if we go down to routine somewhere, maybe stream. Yeah, because routine is a subclass of stream. Clock. So we say app clock instead. And now, if we run this, there we go. Look, ma, no hands. So now, if we were we could make this jump all over, and you'd have to like chase it with the mouse, and like it would be hard to close it. So there we go. We're making a window dance. We're already I don't know. This is the most pointless exercise you could possibly imagine. Okay. So I've closed it, and the routine is probably still running. I think it's trying to set the bounds. It doesn't care that the window's been closed. It's still setting the bounds. It's just the window's been closed. So let's just go ahead and do r.stop. All right. So those are windows. I think I'll just delete this, and we can come back to it. So let's get rid of background. We'll just do a new window, the front always on top. Okay, first things first, let's put a slider. And we should give it a name, because we'll want to refer to it and change its value, change its background color, set its value remotely. So let's say slider. Slider.new. So slider.new. You guys with me so far? You guys, everything making sense? So sliders is sort of the most basic, I think it's one of the more basic items. When you make a new GUI object, it could be a button, could be a knob, it really only needs to know two things. It needs to know what is my parent view, what window or what parent view what parent view do I live on, and what are my bounds. I need to know what my parent view is, in this case W, right? This is our parent here, and it needs to know where do I go. So when we make a window on our desktop, the first argument of rect corresponds to left, and it says top, but it actually treats it as the bottom, I think. But here it definitely starts in the upper left. So if we say rect 0, 0, 200 width, 20 height. Oh, and I made a new window too. So I'll just close this one. So as you can see, the bounds of the slider start at pixel 0, 0. It's 200 pixels long, and it's 20 pixels tall. And we have made a slider. When I do my GUI code, in like a larger project, I always just do it in one big clump. I don't do any sort of live coding with GUI where I'll have another section down here where I dynamically add and remove GUI elements. It's usually not the point of GUI. Usually you make it all at once, and then you sort of, do what you need to do with it. So we can bring this in a little bit. So now it's got a little bit of a border, and here's our slider. So let's see what we can do with it. Slider dot background. And we might as well talk about color a little bit. The color class, that is. So background is a attribute which is common to all views, not just sliders, but everything has a background, and it is an instance of the color class, which represents a color. And so the basic way to use color is .new, and you provide floats between 0 and 1 for red, green, and blue. So we can say 1, 0, 0, and this will give us red. And if we do 0, 1, 0, that gives us green. We can mix green and blue to get cyan. And the last value is a transparency value, where 1 is opaque and 0 is transparent, I think. It has something to do with the transparency of the background of the window. I'm not sure. And color.rand basically just gives you random values for RG and B between 0.3 and 0.9. There's also a few convenience methods, like color.magenta, color.yellow, black. I think there's also clear. It's not clear. Anyway, so that's background. Slider dot. Okay, let's talk about some important ones, right? Background is fun, but that's like eating dessert. It's like you don't need to actually color your GUI until you're actually all done, and then you want to make it look nice. All right, I know, yeah, it's looking good. All right, so our slider, I think every view has understands the message value. And right now, this slider, is between 0 and 1. That's how most GUI behaves. So now it's got a value of 1. Now it's got a value of 0.66, etc. And now it's 0.03. So we can, at any time, get the value of a GUI object. As long as we've given it a name, we can just say .value, and it returns the current value. Views also have an action. And this is probably the most important way. This is how we get GUI objects to do stuff. I mean, as you can see, the slider doesn't do anything right now. It's just wiggling back and forth and not controlling anything. So the way we get it to do stuff is by setting its action attribute equal to a function, which contains valid code that is evaluated whenever the slider's action function needs to be taken. This means if you touch the slider or move the slider, or if you simply call the appropriate method on it, which causes it to evaluate its action, that would be slider.value action. And then you give it a value, and then it evaluates its action. We'll get to that in just a second. First, let's give it an action. We'll make it say hello. .postln. So we have just updated the action attribute. It's the function which posts the string hello. And there we go. And it's posting hello. We can clear the post window and keep moving it. And every time we touch the slider, move the slider, its action is evaluated. But posting hello is not really useful. So, well, for starters, like this when we made a MIDI def to get MIDI value in, I think we made that say hello or something, just to show that when it receives a MIDI value, a MIDI message, an action is taken and we can get it to do stuff. But then we said, okay, let's actually post the contents of the MIDI message, and that was a little more useful. So here, let's actually post the value of the slider. How do we get the value of the slider? You know, I don't know, Jake, what rate SuperCollider is reading slider values at. I'm not sure how that scheduling is handled. I mean, it's not reading at a rate. It's not like it's checking the value every certain number of seconds. It's, at least in this case, I lost my window, right? Now let's make it again. In this case, it is just, you know, it only calls the function when the slider's action is called upon to be evaluated. Yeah, Dan is right. It's an event. You could make a routine or something which randomly changes the value, and that would be run. Yeah, the click and drag. I mean, it's a pixel move event. Yeah, so I'll just move it 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel. So yeah, it's just a pixel thing. And it's gonna you know, the values are from 0 to 1, but the floats that we get are determined by how many pixels long it is, basically. So if there's 100 pixel steps, it's gonna be 0, 0.01, 0.02, 0.03. I think that's how it works. Okay, so as I was saying, to get the slider's value, this should seem familiar. We pass in an argument. And the argument, which we can call whatever we like, corresponds to the instance of the GUI object itself. So obj for object. Or you can call whatever you like, but I'm going to go with obj. And we'll say obj.postln. And this is, and I'm gonna now put these into the same bit of code right here. So instead of a semicolon, I'm just gonna say dot action. So we make a slider, and before we terminate that line, we update its action. We say your action is to post yourself. And what I also might do is just do window.close all at the top, just so we can evaluate this code and not get a bunch of windows piling up, right? We just have the one window each time. So if I move the slider now, well, it's not quite what we wanted, right? It's posting itself, and it is an instance of the slider class. So what do we do here? Well, we need to say object.value, right? What is the value of this GUI object? Post that. And that's what we wanted, right? So we have all the way up to 1. And even if I keep dragging to the right, it's still evaluating its action. See, if I go to the left, we still get a bunch of zeros. So, right, that's how sliders work. And now I think there's a couple fun hotkeys, which if I push R while the slider is in focus, like if it's the last thing I clicked, R will pick a new random value and evaluate the action. If I push C, it centers itself, and then N goes to the left, and one of these goes to the X. Yeah, X, N, X. Why would it be N and X? S, J, K, L, and I don't know. I can't figure it out. I mean, I type on Dvorak instead of QWERTY, so I was wondering if there was something weird going on there. So anyway, that's a slider. And now, I mean, I don't know. Is that a standard thing? Nil and extent? I'm sure there's a good reason. And for new, maybe. I don't know. Well, is it working for you guys? Can you make a slider and then new and N and X and R and whatever? All right. This is not the only way to call the GUI object's action function. You know, we don't always have to click on it to call its action. What we can do is say slider.value action. And set this attribute to be, let's say, 0.5. Now what happens here with value action is it updates the value of the GUI object with this numerical value and then calls the action function. So what we will see is the thumb here, what is called the so-called thumb or the slider handle, jump to 0.5, which should be in the middle. R is definitely for random. Yes, that I know. And C is for center. But I would expect like L and H for low and high or something. But it's N and X, so who knows. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see the thumb snap to the center, and we will see 0.5 in the post window. So, oh, okay, yeah, there we go. Very fun. We can do 0.25. And so this is the alternative way of getting a GUI object to call its action. Is we have some we could evaluate this, or we could have some other GUI object call code which updates the slider. Now, sometimes we want to update the value of a GUI object, but we don't want to call the action. And for that, we say just value. And now what we'll see here is the thumb jump to 0.8, so 80% of the way through the slider, but we will not see anything posted because the action function will not be evaluated. Right? It still returns a slider because that's how evaluating code works in SuperCollider, but we didn't post anything. So this is like a quiet way of updating an object. We don't want it to actually go into action. We just want to update its value. But here, we actually post its value. These are really important because in some situations, you'll have some GUI objects controlling other objects. Like, for example, if we wanted to make another slider, like a pair of sliders that always move in tandem, you know, like a left-right sort of locked together pair of sliders on a mixer, we would want one of those to call value action on the other and then update its own value. But you don't want them calling value action on each other because that is a feedback loop, or, you know, it's an infinite loop basically, and you'll crash. You'll crash big time. So you just want to be careful when you're doing value and value action. Let me take a look at what we have here. We've done window, rect, always on top, view, slider. Yeah, so these underscores here, right? This is the setter notation where we are setting an attribute. You know, GUI object dot attribute underscore update this attribute to be equal to this value. And if we just want to get the value, oh, we just do this, right? Now it's nil because we closed the window. So now the value is 0, right? And so we're querying here. And if we update it, we are saying update yourself. Your value is now this. Pretty straightforward, not too complicated. Oh, so sometimes it's nice to or useful to make a GUI object disappear, which we can do with visible false. A slider is still perfectly alive, right? It's there. We can't touch it. We can't move it. We can't. But I think we can update its values, right? We can say, you know, there we go. It's now 0.9, and we've run its action. And now we can say slider.visible true, and sure enough, there it is. So the fact that it's visible is just sort of a, you know, not necessarily correlated to anything. How do we set values not using underbar notation? You would do it like this, just simply setting it to some value, which is perfectly legal. But when doing GUI things, I sometimes find the underscore setter notation useful because it allows you to string multiple messages together. You can say slider.value underscore this dot background underscore color dot rand dot whatever, and then at the end of it, a semicolon, because you're all done. This way, you kind of have to do it on multiple lines. So you'd have to type slider again dot, you know, background equals color dot gray, Gary, dot gray, 0.2, you know, so we'd have to do like this and then this, or maybe in a clump. Let's do rrand 0.0, 1.0. And we can maybe randomize to 0.8. And this is fine, but the underscore notation allows us to do this, and then just simply say, continue the sentence here. Value action is this, dot background is this. And it's just a personal preference thing, but I guess I tend to prefer this underscore notation. It is a syntax shortcut sort of throughout SuperCollider. I think it's not just for GUI. It's a syntax that you can use pretty much anywhere when you're setting some message or some parameter equal to something else. Okay, that's slider. And so things like background, value, and action, these are very useful, and they're common to all views. All views have a value. All views have, I think all views have a value. Sometimes it's not useful, but they have a value. All views have an action that they can do when they're engaged in some way. They can all be made visible and invisible. Here's another one. This is, I use this quite often. Slider dot enabled, and this is another Boolean. Right now it's true because we can touch it and move it, but we can say false, and now you can see it's slightly grayed out, right? And I'm clicking, I'm moving, but it is not enabled. That doesn't mean that we can't update its values, though. It can still be modified and manipulated with code, but enabled just refers to the user's ability to interact with it, like from the mouse or the keyboard. Or I wonder if, yeah, R and C don't work. So it's just a way of saying to the user, you can't touch this. This is not allowed. So you can make something enabled true or false. Make it true, and now we can touch it again. You'll notice that there's a slight blue halo around the slider. And let's make another slider. Let's call this slider 0, and we'll make another slider called slider 1. And this is going to be, let's make it 60 pixels below, same size. So this is there's going to be a 20 pixel gap between these two. And it's going to have the same action. So now we have two sliders, and they're independent. They have the same action, so they both post their value. And so we've got this halo around this first one, and now it's on the second one and first one. So it's whichever object you touched last. And this is the idea of focus, whether something is in focus or not. And when something is focused, you can also use the keyboard. I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard now. I think, yeah, tab will cycle focus through objects, very similar to web browsers and stuff like that. And I think so now R will randomize the one in focus. Press tab, I can randomize this one. And sometimes you don't want GUI to be able to focus. So I think I can say slider dot can focus false, and it's not called slider anymore, it's called slider 0. So now slider 0 can't focus? Yeah, I guess it was focused initially, but as soon as so now this one is focused, it's got the blue halo, and this one is not focused, so if we press R, we're still randomizing the one in focus. In some cases, you'll want things to be able to focus so you can tab through them, and in some cases, you probably don't want them to be focused, so that's how you do that. That is, that's the slider. Let's start this over here. All right. Well, and then there are a few, last thing I'm going to do with slider. I know this is so boring, and we're not making any sound. This is the worst. So last thing I'm going to do, there's all GUI objects have some attributes which are specific to them. For example, there's no okay, so for slider, there's no, thank you, I don't want to be full screen right now. Thumb size. This is not the right help file, is it? No. Slider. Yeah, thumb size. The size of the handle, its width or height depending on orientation in pixels. So we can say slider1 dot thumb size. Sorry, I didn't mean to evaluate that. 20. Oh, is 20 the... What did I do? Unexpected... Hold on. Was that an error I got for... I think 20 is the default size. I think it's already 20 pixels. So let's do 50. Yep. So we've changed the thumb size. And we can make this one 10. So this is something which makes sense for sliders, but not necessarily all GUI objects. So it's defined for slider, but it's a good idea to look through the help file just to get a sense of the attributes that it understands, like knob color. Yeah, it's all sorts of stuff. Let's make some more objects. Tell you what, let's make a button and let's make it turn a sound on and off. Right? That's a pretty basic thing we want to be able to do. Right, so maybe we will just temporarily comment out our sliders. And we'll put a button in the upper right-hand corner. So we'll say 340 pixels over, 20 pixels down. It'll be 40 by 40. Maybe trying to get the borders correct. Let's just stop there. Hey, look at that. It's a button. I'll move it over a little bit. 340. Lovely. So this is a button. Right now it doesn't do anything. So let's talk about buttons. Buttons need to know how many states it has. Now, a toggle button has 2 states, on and off. But it's also possible to make a button that cycles through more than 2 states. You know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But we'll just make 2 states. And the states attribute needs an array containing an internal array, 1 for each state. So this is state 0, this is state 1. And a state needs, first of all, it needs the text to be displayed. And I think we might, let's move this to the left by 40 and make it 40 pixels wider. I think, yeah, so because I want to put like the word on and off, and so we might want a rectangular shape instead of like a square shape. So it needs to know the text and then the color of the text and the color of the background. Let's have this be like gray 0.02. So this is, you know, with 0.1 being black, sorry, 0 being black and 1 being white. So that's our first state. It says off, it's got a dark gray string color and a light gray background. And we'll say on color, we'll make this white and color dot green. Let's do color dot new. If you think in terms of 255, there is a new 255 method where you can specify as RGB values that are 8-bit, you know, between 0 and 255. But let's just do 0, 1.5. So full green, half blue, no red. And now let's run this code. Off, on, off, on, off, on. Lovely. I'm going to make this black instead because that seems easier to read. Now the font seems a little small for this button. Maybe we want to fill the whole button with the font. Well, there is an attribute called font. And we provide an instance of the font class. So font is, you know, font.new. And font.new expects a font name and a size. And then you can do booleans for bold, italic, whatever. Now, you want to be a little bit careful with your font name types, because if you have some wacky font installed on your computer, like awesome font, it's not going to work on somebody else's computer because they don't have that font installed. So it's good to go with something super safe, like, you know, the really, really standard fonts like Helvetica. And if you don't know what fonts you have, I think you can do font.available fonts. Boom. And so you could do something like this. You could choose one of the available fonts. You wouldn't really want to do this though, because you might get like wingdings or crazy symbols or stuff. But you can at least see what you have available. So Helvetica will certainly work. And then the font size. And this is, I think, in pixels. And it's 40 pixels tall, this button. So let's just go with like 32. And let's delete fonts.available fonts. That looks a little better. It's kind of big. Let's do like 24. That looks nice. You can do like Arial. It's another font that I think works. Courier. But what I usually do, I try not to get fancy with my fonts because that's just so silly. It's like, it's whatever. So what I will instead do is use another font class method called font.default. There's default sans face and default serif face. So I think that gives you the default serif font, and default sans face will give you something without serifs. And I think this is a relatively safe thing to do. As long as, because I think no matter what operating system you're on, font.default sans face is going to access your system fonts in some way, and it's going to give you something like that. Ooh, I don't know. Oh, well, probably. I mean, you can, I don't know. I've never really got into that, but I mean, like, there must be some sort of way, like, let's look at the font class, where you can test, say, if a certain font exists. Oh, there's also default monoface and font.default. What you could do is something like, okay, so font.available fonts. Is there a contains method for collections? Yeah, contains Helvetica. No. Message contains receive. Oh, so maybe that doesn't work. There's other ways to do this, but the way let's see, collect n. No, select. We're gonna select anything if n is equal to Helvetica. Yeah, so we can do dot size. We can do a conditional check here. So this will return. It'll go through the collection of available fonts and select anything that matches the string Helvetica, and then return an array containing anything that matched that. So then we can do dot size greater than 0. And this is a conditional check that you can do in your code. This is true. This means Helvetica exists, so then use Helvetica. Yes, but you probably wouldn't really need to know the index of where a font exists. You just need to know that it exists. Yeah, you could do that though, if that would be useful. So this is a way that you can get a Boolean as to whether or not a font exists. Me, I just do default sans face, and I've never had anybody complain that the code is broken. Okay, so there we go. We got a button, and we click it, and let's just quickly talk about, you know, value. So we can say button dot value. It is currently 1. It's in state number 1. If we click it and get button.value, it's now state 0. And we could update its value by setting it equal to 1. And if you want to use code to step through 0 and 1, we can say, I think, yeah, 1 minus button.value. So this says update the value with 1 minus your current value. So 0 becomes 1 and 1 becomes 0. So with one line of code, you can just go to the other state. Okay, I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back. I mean, you can watch the video later, but I'll give it to you now just so you can copy it. You wanted this one, right, Dungrul? Yeah, we sort of know select. We've done collect and do. Select is similar. A function includes a conditional check, and if it returns true, that object stays in the array, and if it returns false, it gets kicked out of the array. So I'll keep that on there. But now let's give the button an action, right? It's got states, it's got a font, but it doesn't have an action. So let's keep it simple first and say that the action will pass in. So I have this, I have my own conventions. I sometimes do SLD for slider, or BTN for button, or KNB for knob, or we can just do OBJ again, object. And we'll do object.value. We already know what this is going to return. We're going to see a button in the post window, but let's do it anyway. I'm going to comment this out as well. So there you go. You still got it there. All right. And now when we click the button, we get, why do I not see? Oh, because I didn't put post.ln. It's just, so the action is being evaluated, but there's no post.ln, so we don't see anything. Oh yeah, so what I meant to do was this. Now, when we just do object.post.ln, we just get a button, because that's what object is. It's a button. But if we say value, we see the state of the button. And so now we can do something interesting here. We'll boot the server first. And so we need a little bit of conditional logic because it's a button. And what we want to do will depend on the state of the button. So we can still keep posting it. That's fine. And now we want our good friend if. If object.value equals 1. X equals pink noise dot yeah, okay, fine, pink noise dot play. Otherwise, x dot free. This is a little sloppy. It's gonna work, but it's not something we could easily expand. So let's go ahead and run that. Aha! Genius. Love it. Okay. We've made a button that makes sound. One reaction I'm having here is that whenever you're making sound, pink noise is fine. This is function.play is the quick and dirty way of making sound. So I'm thinking, oh, we should put an envelope on it. But, at that point, we should start making a synth def and make some actually interesting sound that we can turn on and off. Right? Let's change this to a sine wave. Let's make it with a lovely binaural beating. This is just a silly, easy thing that I do just to make the sound a little more interesting. Right? And I think the play method actually adds an envelope. Yeah, it does. So we could do this, I think. Yeah. When we do function.play, there's actually a lot of stuff that goes on in the background. It adds a linear envelope with a gate argument. So, and we can also do fade time this. It's a little long, maybe 1 second. So, any questions so far? the next thing I'm thinking we might do is make a slider, or maybe a knob. We show off knobs for a little bit, and the knobs will the knob can change the frequency, so we'll be able to sweep through the frequency or something like that. So I guess let's go ahead and do that. It's really not, I mean, these are not fantastic naming schemes. It's sometimes a little bit better to put things in arrays, like have an array of buttons if you're making multiple buttons. So, you know, as your GUI projects get more complex and more developed, you'll probably want to be a little bit more rigorous with how you name things and how you store things, just so it makes sense to you. Oh yeah, and usually I skip the new methods. Whenever you see .new, you can kind of skip it. At least, certainly for GUI objects. Not across the board, but for GUI stuff, if you just say knob and open parentheses, it's going to make a new knob. So this goes on W. Maybe we'll put it right below the button. I guess we don't need this color.new also. So the button is here. So 300 pixels over, 20, 40, 80 pixels down. Seems about right. 80, 80. It's going to be a big old knob. There it is. Right. So knobs are good. Let's make the knob do something. So we give the knob an action. Arg object.value.postln. Start there. And the knob posts its value. By convention, GUI objects with numerical values go from 0 to 1. And what we will do is expand this a little bit so it's a little bit more readable. So we'll make a frequency argument for this sound function. And we'll say freak plus 2. Right? That still works. It's good. It's good to check stuff incrementally. And anytime the knob is moved, x.set freak. And now, okay, so now we have to do a little creative thinking here. Because, you know, we can't just set the frequency to 0 or 1. We can't use the raw value. As soon as we touch the knob, the frequency will jump to somewhere between 0 and 1, and we'll stop hearing stuff because that's too low for us to hear. So we need to use our good friend linexp, which will take an input range of 0 to 1 and map it to something like 250 to, I don't know, 700. Whatever we feel like. Okay, so that's silly, but that's sort of how it's done. There. Oh yeah, and then that's no good, right? It's just I have this instinct to just touch stuff and as long as the sound is playing, no problem, right? But turn it off, and as soon as that node, let's look at the node tree briefly. Let's see what we got going on here. The problem should be fairly obvious. The knob has no problem setting a node that exists, but when we free it, it fades out, it disappears, and the node, sorry, not the node, the knob is calling x.set, but x doesn't exist. X was a node, but it has been freed and it disappeared. So you might remember that we can register sounds. This doesn't fix our problem yet. We have to do a little bit of conditional logic. So we can say if x.is playing, then update its frequency argument. So as soon as we touch the knob, it checks to see if X is playing. And if it is, update it. If it's not, do nothing. So now if we move the knob, no error messages because X is not playing. It's false. And another problem, listen to what happens when I start the sound and then just nudge the knob a little bit. What's the problem here? Well, the initial frequency value is 300. It doesn't care where the knob is, even though the knob is controlling the frequency. So what we need to do is set the default argument of the sound according to the knob position. Now, we can't just say, I don't think this is going to work if we say knob.value. I think we'll get an error here, or not. No, we get nothing. Let's try that again. So if we do this, yeah, we get no sound. I think we will see, do we see any signal? Yeah, there's our sine wave. It's like, probably like 1 hertz or something. It's just, you can't, you're not really allowed to do this. You can't initialize what is essentially a UGen as some expression. I think that's not allowed. And I think now is probably the right time to actually make a synth def and stop goofing around with this. So let's go up and just make a synth def here. Tone, argfreak, sine, osc, freak +2, out. Very, very simple synth def. .add. And, oh, we'll leave that open. So, and then down here, instead of doing this, we just want to say synth tone.register. And we want, now here is where we set the initial value, right? We don't set any crazy knob stuff in here. No. We'll just give it some dummy value. It doesn't really matter. And when the button is pressed and it goes to state 1, we make a new synth, and here is where we say frequency is knob.value .linexp. Same mapping here. I think there is a class called control. Good, get out of here. Control spec. And I think this class makes it easier. I don't use this class, but I need to actually use it. I think it avoids you having to do a bunch of linexps everywhere. Like you provide a specification for mapping some values, and then you can use as spec. I should look into this. I mean, if those of you who are interested and want a little bit of a challenge, you can try to incorporate that into your GUI stuff. I think it probably makes things easier. But anyway, what we want to do here is this. So let's just double check this here. We have a synth def, and when we press the button, we, if the state is 1, we make a synth called X, and we set its frequency initially to be the value of the knob, whatever it happens to be. Might be over here, might be over here, might be over here. And then we register the synth. If we move the knob and the synth is still playing, we set the frequency. And if the button is off, we set the gate. Oh, it doesn't have a gate anymore. because we're not using function.play. That is fine. We'll just go with that. Okay, so now it's got a gate. No, it doesn't. We have to add a gate and then proceeds to not add a gate argument. There we go. This is a sustaining envelope, right? Sustain time? No, it's not. Let's just do ASR. Attack, sustain, release. That is a sustain level. That's what we want. So now, and we'll just take that away. We don't want fade time anymore. This should work. Okay, well, this is more basic GUI stuff for you. How's everybody doing? Questions? Concerns? Revolts? Mutinies? Another thing you might notice is it's a little hard to hear, but there's a sort of graininess in the sound. And it's probably a little bit easier to hear if we make the range a little bit bigger. Cool. Good to hear, Schweidi. Like if you're not going to like me for this, but we're going to make it go a little bit higher. Oh, and we need to do the other linexp as well. See, this is why control spec is useful, because you don't want to have to change a whole bunch of linexps everywhere in your code. So this is one of my weaknesses. I mean, imagine if you have a bunch of mappings everywhere throughout your code. You just want to put, you know, as spec and then like the instance of control spec. It's something like that. You know, because this is so stupid to have to modify multiple Linux. This is not the way to do it. Cool. Oh yeah, final projects, right. Don't forget, I want your final project ideas by Friday. So thanks for the reminder. Okay, so now, yeah. So you should be able to hear that there's like a sort of glitchy, grainy, chunky sound. It's like a noisy sort of scraping back and forth. And that is because, you know, if you're moving the mouse fast enough, the knob will sort of jump a few pixels, and it causes the frequency to sort of instantaneously jump to a new value, and that basically gives us a discontinuity in the waveform. It's not a crazy discontinuity or anything like that, but you know, we don't want to change synthesis parameters instantaneously. Usually, we want to make them a little bit sluggish, and we can do that with something I showed in class last time: lag. So let's just start with a lag value of 0.05. And now it's much smoother. We can go even higher. And let's just compare that briefly to no lag. And here it is with 1/10 of a second of lag. So you should surely be able to hear the difference when we get a new value. When we move the knob and the synth is playing and we update the frequency to a new value, it takes 1/10 of a second to get there. Yes. Register is a method. Yes, good question. Register is a method defined for many things, but one of those things is node. Right, our good friend node. And where's register? So we can register a synth or a group. And what this does is it tags it so that the class node watcher is basically keeping track of whether it's alive. And once we register a node, in this case, a synth, then we have the ability to query its status by saying x.isPlaying, which will return either true or false. So when we register a synth, we have the ability to then do conditional logic and make certain choices or take certain actions depending on whether x is playing, whether that's true or false. An alternative to using register is to here this is sort of clever. We'll make a group, and we'll print the node tree here. Bring this up here. Okay, here it comes, node tree. And what we'll do is make a group. So now if we run this, is it really gonna? Oh, it's because window.closeAll is closing my node tree. Okay, we'll comment that out. Node tree, and there's our group. Right. Let's press Command period and do it again. Right. So we've made a group, but that's not all we're going to do. We are also going to bring this node tree up again. We are not going to even give this a name anymore. We're going to say synth, and we will place it in the group G. Remember, we can do the name of the synth, an array of arguments, and then the target. We're going to put it in group G. And when the button goes off, we're going to tell the group, set your gate to 0, and the group says, well, I'm a group, so I don't know how to do that, but I will tell everybody inside of me to set your gate to 0. And so that gets passed internally to the synth in group G. And then here, we're not even going to check. We're just, because we know the group exists. We're never doing anything to the group. So all we have to do here is g.set. And that's it. There's something going on here. Oh yeah, I think I can delete that. Right. So this is an alternative, and I think this should work. So we'll run this, we get a group, and when we click the button, we get a synth in the group. And this works just fine because the group gets the set message for frequency and passes it internally to its synth. And now we can do this. And pressing the button into the off state sends the group a set message, and it says, oh, okay, I'll set everything inside of me to have their gate now equal to 0. So now right. Yeah, so there's a lot of directions we can take this. It's I hope this is giving everyone some final project ideas. Let's do a quick static text. Right? Let's say if you give this to somebody, I don't want 2 groups. I want 1 group. If you give this to somebody, there's a lot to be said about designing your GUI in such a way that it is intuitive to use. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made there. Like the really hot selling DAW plugins, it's because anyone can sort of open them up and be like, oh, I get how this works. And, it's got a good workflow to it. It's got a good organizational structure to it. So that's all very nice. And here it's like, what the heck does this knob do? It's like, is it off? Does the knob control off? I don't understand, and it's, it controls frequency. Got it. Why didn't someone put a label here that says frequency? Well, let's go do that. Let's make what I would use for this is static text. And I often don't give my static texts names because I find myself not really talking to them anymore. I just make them once and I just let them live on the window and just be completely inaccessible because, I never really need to do anything with them. So we'll just say static text w rect You know, maybe we'll 300, 160, you know, because this is 80 pixels down and it's 80 pixels tall, so 160. I tend to work in multiples of 10. Helps me sleep at night. We'll have it be the same width as the knob, and we'll make it be 20 pixels tall. And when we run this, we won't see anything. We won't see anything because static texts, by default, they're string. Their text is the empty string, and their color is either clear or they're invisible or something. I think their color, I don't know what their color is. What if we say dot background? This should return, gonna return an instance of, no. Oh, maybe they don't have a background color, so that's why we don't see them. I'm being really sloppy here. Let's just command period. Okay, so we can say dot background color dot rand, and now we can see that it is there. We just couldn't see it before because it didn't have a color, it didn't have any words or anything. So let's make this like gray 0.7. Let's go back to window.close_all. It'll make things a little smoother. There we go. So sort of fits in with our boring gray color scheme. And let's put some words on it. For static text, that is string. And it is a string. There we go. So we've set its background color and we've set its string to be freak. Now it's like left aligned, which, you know, looks bad. So let's align it. And for this, we choose one of 3 symbols, either left, right, which looks like that, and of course, center. So there you go. And now maybe we don't, another advantage of using this, you know, this underscore syntax and stringing messages together is we can easily just comment one of them out. And now the background color is back to being nothing. So it's just the word freak here. So there are many things you can do. You could make a button with just one state, or, you know, whenever you click it, it just makes a percussive sound, you know, that terminates itself rather than on, off. Let's make another. What's the best way to do this? Call it, I don't know, button 2. God, I'm like the worst programmer. So sloppy with my names. Button.new. We'll make this, we'll just stick it over here a little bit. States, in this case, we're just going to give it one array, and it's going to be hit me. Color dot, we'll keep it the same as this one. As the on state, except maybe we'll do like, we'll switch the colors a little bit. So that button just says hit me, has one state, doesn't do anything. We can give it an action. Yeah, in this case, we don't even really need to pass in the object itself because it doesn't have values we care about. We don't need to know if it's in state 1 or state 0 because it's just got one state. So we could skip that if we wanted. And then, you know, we will say, oh, let's make another synth-def real quick. Tone 2, get rid of the gate, and env.perc. Yeah. I think that's fine. I didn't mean to do that. So we'll just say synth, tone 2, and then we'll say freak, xbrand, 200, 2000. Add it to G, and that gonna work? It is gonna work. There we go. I want this to be white. And the way I have it set up right now is as you can see, I'm just awkwardly, I'm not quitting the server or freeing everything. The group is still there, but when I run this code again, we get a new group. So we have this sort of sloppiness going on. So one thing we can do with the window is Windows have another attribute called onClose. This is an action, i.e. a function, to be evaluated when the window is closed. And we'll just free all the nodes from the server. So this happens, I think we're gonna need to put this at the top. Window.closeAll first, then we make a new group. Let's see if this works. So we'll quit that, run this, and it closed my window. So, okay, here it is. Got the group. So that's all fine. And now, if I just run this again, and then bring up the node tree, no, I have no group. I have a feeling it's making this group first, and then the action is taking place. So here's what we'll do. We can put that there. So when the window is closed, first we free everything, then we make a new group. I think this will work. No? Well, what if we s.bind? I think this forces these to occur simultaneously. On close. Yeah, see, when we close it, we get that group. So that's what we want. Oh. It's because we don't make the group in the first place. So, wait a minute. Okay. This is a very ridiculous detour here, but okay, so there we go. We've run our code, and we have our group. I think I just needed to do one iteration because we weren't actually making the group at the beginning. This might be the right thing to do. Just try this. Let's quit the server, boot the server, and run this code. And then let's see, make sure we have our group, and we do. And so now, if we close, well, let's just rerun the code. Yes. And as soon as we run the code again, we get a new window, we close the old one, and we have our group again. So we're sort of using GUI to handle initializing the node tree the way we want. All right, well, this is good. I think I was going to cover the idea of composite views and flow layouts, which make creating GUIs algorithmically easier. Basically, to just, you want to say, like, you want to do something along the lines of, b equals array.fill, 64 knob.new, right? Wouldn't that be great if you can just do this and, but the, it's tricky because, where do they go? Well, they're like all right on top of each other. They're all in the same place. They have like the default bounds. So we can use a class called flow layout, which turns the window into like a Microsoft Word document. where you have lines and carriage returns. And so when you make these 64 knobs, it'll start in the upper left with certain margins and margins between objects themselves, and it'll just put them in a row, and when it runs out of space on that line, it goes to the next line and starts again. And it basically, you know, it's like holding down a key. It's like, here we go, so we'll make a bunch of knobs, and there's the next row of knobs, and the next row of knobs. You know, that's basically what flow layout does. And rather than cover it here, I'm going to say just go ahead and watch. It's at the end of tutorial 14, and it makes your life a lot easier, and it's very handy. So it's just like an extra 2 or 3 minutes at the end of that video, which you can power through pretty quickly. As I definitely recommend you check that out. So I think what I'd like to do just to finish up here is to just show a few other fun GUI classes. So there is something called Slider 2D. Which, as you would expect, where's my Slider 2D? Is it? Hold on. Going on here. Window.new.front. Slider 2. That is the name of the class, right? Let's try .new here. What did I do wrong? Where's my slider? Oh, ha 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 ha. W. I didn't actually name this anything. So W is my window that has long been gone. It's closed. It doesn't give me an error. Yeah. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think you caught it before me. There's just a stream delay. So, okay, here's my square slider that I just made. So slider 2D, that is a slider with 2 dimensions to it. So that's fun. Let's go to list of GUI objects. No, it's list of GUI classes. What's fun? Let's do range slider. So this is a range slider. You can do stuff like this. What are its attributes? Yeah, so there's a message. Oh, I didn't mean to click on that. There's a message low, which is the low end of the range. High, range, the difference between high and low. And it's got a bunch of other interesting things that you can play with. Multi-slider view. This, let's see what the default gives us. Nothing very interesting. Let's make it square. And I think we need to set a few attributes here. Let me look at the examples. Come on, examples. Basic examples, just what I wanted. N 20. How many sliders does it have? Some size. 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 It's just size. How did I miss that? Size 20. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It can't fit them all on there. So if we do, make it a little bit bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Is that 20? That's only 19. So if we go super far, yeah. So I guess you kind of have to do the math yourself with the multi-slider. So if we do like 200 size 10, is that gonna, no, size is the number of, elastic mode. Yeah, I think that's what I want. Elastic mode true. Haha, right, so now it automatically gives you 10. And so if we did size 20 and made this a little bit smaller, yeah, elastic mode, it just fits in there for you automatically. So what this returns, well, what is the value of this thing, right? Well, let's just get it to post its value. As you might be able to guess, it is, wait a minute, make this big again. Ugh. I think it's an array. Right? Aha. Yeah, so now they're all 1. Now they're all 0. And so now I've made it so that they ascend, right? So it's just click and drag across it, multi-slider view, very handy. This is fun for, you know, if you're making like a drum sequencer, you can sort of, you know, create an accent pattern just by sort of painting like this. Yeah, it's very fun. It's just fun to do. And there's other settings where you can get it so instead of like floating sliders, floating like squares here, it's actually you know, it's like an actual meter or something. Index draw rects. I'm gonna guess it's draw rects. Is that gonna work? No. Draw lines. It's somewhere here. It's been a while since I played with. I'll let you figure it out, but that's a fun object to mess around with. And there's also let's see, pop-up menu. I think it's items, and you give it an array of strings. It's quite large, but we can make it smaller. So there we go. We made a pop-up window. And it returns the value, which is the index of the thing you selected. So hi is index 0, hello, index 1, and goodbye is index 2. So I'll have some simple examples for everybody in class tomorrow. Like, let me see, just to get your wheels turning a little bit. Take a look at some of my notes. Yeah, a button that turns sound on and off. We sort of did that. A slider that controls maybe amplitude instead of something else. Make a knob pan a sound left and right. Make GUI objects that change the color of other GUI objects. Make GUI objects change their own attributes. I'll try to keep these practical, and you know, make your own, like on this window, like for example, make, you know, like make it borderless and make your own close button. So you have a little X over here, you can click it and the window closes. Stuff like that. It's should be fun. Should be fun. I hope it's you know, this I'm thinking at this point in the semester, with the conclusion of GUI, that's a lot of basic information, pretty much everything you'll probably need to do like a more substantial final project. I mean, you know how to make synth defs and make synths so you can make sound. And you know some basic server stuff like groups and setting arguments, booting the server. And you've now got patterns under your belt, so you can actually make a sequence of stuff. And then you can, you know, with a little bit of practice and familiarity, start building a GUI so that you can launch some code. It sets everything up and plants a big GUI window, you know, right in front of you. And then you can start playing with stuff. Oh, you know what? All right, we'll do one extra fun thing. I want to make a slider, and I'm going to make my nano control slider control that slider. That'll be the last thing we do. We don't need new. W rect. Let's make it vertical. So I think it'll pick the orientation automatically if we do stuff like this. And let's put the bounds up here. So something like, was it 900? Let's nudge it over. Okay, so we have this, and we need to make a MIDI def, right? That's the first step to getting MIDI data in. We'll give this a name. And at the top here, let's do MIDI in.connect all. Go. And now we'll say MIDI def.cc slider arg value number channel, and we'll just post the value and the number. So this last slider here is controller number 7. So I will only have this MIDI def listen on CC number 7. And what I will have it do is slider.value num divided by 127. Because the values coming in are between 0 and 127. That's how MIDI works. But I want to map those to a value that the slider expects, which is between 0 and 1. So we can simply divide by 127 in that case. Oh, aha. Ooh, see that? Same error. Now we're not inside of a routine, so it's like, you know, there's no play. We can't say .play app clock because we're not playing anything. But it's the same problem. There must be some scheduling element that determines when and how MIDI def, you know, like evaluates its function as MIDI data is coming in. So if you encounter this message, you know, like inside of a MIDI def or something where there's no actual routine or explicit scheduling going on, what you do, and this is very good to know, is you wrap the code inside a function and say .defer, and this is a shortcut. I think it's just a shortcut for creating a routine and playing it on the app clock. Yes, so defer is defined for functions as delay the evaluation of this function by delta in seconds. So there must be some default. I don't know what the default time is, but I guess you can say like a millisecond or something, or maybe even 0. But the point of defer is that it sorry, that goes here. The point of defer is that it basically causes this code to be scheduled on the app clock. So this should work. What? Not working. Huh. What is the deal here? Slider. Oh, oh, oh my God. You know, it's always something stupid. I'm setting the value to be the controller number instead of the actual controller value. So it's just going to 7. Every time I move it, it's like, oh, the number is 7. So it goes to value, to basically the value corresponding to 7 divided by 127. So this should be val. And that's much more satisfying. Up, down, up, down. Yeah, lovely. And currently the MIDI def is responsible for posting the value. We can put that in the action of the slider. You know, so it posts the value of the slider instead. But here we won't, semicolon after arg object. Here we won't actually see anything because if you can spot this, brownie points, you know, we have a post ln. It's because the MIDI def is not calling value action. It's just silently setting the value of the slider. But if we touch it, we're actually calling the value and evaluating the action. So we can just change this to value action. Slider.value action. Set the value of the slider and call the action. So now moving the slider here also calls the slider's action. So this is always a fun sort of final project idea, is to make something where you can move all these faders and, you know, basically make a mirror image of the MIDI controller on screen. Of course, you can't have it go the other way. You know, this controller, the faders are not motorized. So try all you like, you can move this fader and nothing will happen here. So this actually means you can cause these values to go out of sync. So now this one's up high, but this one's down low. So if I move it, boop, jumps to the bottom. But still, you know, you get the basic idea. Yeah, and thanks, Alan and Drongrule, for catching my mistake. I thought it was something weirder, but no, it was just something stupid. All right. Well, I think that's it for GUI. I'll have some nice exercises for everybody in class tomorrow, and then I've got a nice semi-challenging take-home assignment for all of you. In fact, I'm gonna show it to you right now. Let's see. You make tic-tac-toe. Right? And X goes to block, and O is not looking good. So in the post window, we have X wins. Right? And once somebody wins, we can't click on anything else. So we have to click the reset button. And we play again. And let's see if I can do a draw here. Yeah, it is a draw. And so then we reset again. Of course, you can't, once X has claimed this, we can't click on this and change it. So, yeah, all my code is down here, but I'm hiding it from you on purpose. So I think it's going to be either this. I might make an alternative, like making a simple like sound file player or something where you can drag in a sound file and have like a play button and a loop button, stuff like that. Something, you know, fairly basic, but all stuff that we theoretically know how to do. So, yeah. It's going to be one of two options for a take-home assignment that I've sort of had up my sleeve for quite a while this semester. I hope it's enjoyable and not too difficult. Right. Okay, so that's GUI. A lot of the basics there. Go ahead and watch tutorial 14, especially the end of it when I talk about composite views and flow layouts, because that's all about organizing your GUI objects rather than just dropping 10, 15, 20 objects randomly on a window. having like a sub view, like a composite view, which is like a part of the window, which is for faders, or like your mixing section or your frequency modulation section. And that way you can refer to all of those objects as one thing. You know, helps you organize everything. So go ahead and watch that. I think if you have some time tonight, or maybe just tomorrow. And I will see everybody tomorrow who's taking the class. I hope this was hope this made sense on the whole. And next week we are going to talk about OSC, and hopefully some moving parts on my end for that, but hopefully I'll be able to show my iPad on stream and make a little interface in TouchOSC, and then be able to control SuperCollider using my iPad by sending OSC communication. Should be a lot of fun. And after that, we've got some other topics, but I think I'm just going to let everybody focus on their final projects and sort of debug that sort of stuff in class. Maybe some very light take-home assignments. So thanks everybody for watching, if you're out there. And I'll be back next week with OSC. And all my students, I'll see you in class tomorrow. And feel free to email me if you have any questions about anything at all. So unless there's any paste bins or last minute questions, I think I might head home. I know some of you guys like went to, I think what would you guys end up going to Popeyes? You guys are probably in like a food coma by now. Anyway, whatever it was, I hope it was good. We'll go home and eat some dinner. Drag and drop. Okay. That's a good one. Quickly see if I can do some drag and drop stuff. So I think the object is a drag sync. And this is just a place for you to drag stuff. And let's see what happens if we do just post the value. And then let's also make a everyone bailed. Oh, well, I'm glad you're still here. I know it's 10 o'clock, so you know class is over or whatever. But this is a good question, and I'll that Alan asked, so I'll have it here for posterity if I can figure it out. We'll go 300 over, 20 down, 40, 40. Semicolon. I think the way this works is you can hold command, and this is where we might hit some OS differences like between Mac and Windows, but it might be control on Windows, but you can hold command on Mac and click and drag a GUI object, and you're basically grabbing its value, and you drop it here, and the value appears in the drag sync, and its action, that becomes its value, I guess. Yeah, so the drag sync now has the value of the knob. So if we move this, you know, k.value, it's now 0.6900, whatever. D still has the old value, but we can command click and drag, and now they have the same value. And now I'm wondering what happens if I like drag a sound file. Oh, look at that. That's cool. This is what I had in mind for the other option for the take home, where you can basically drag a sound file in, and what you get is the actual absolute path to that sound file. So instead of just posting the value, we could now have drag sync do something like You know, as long as you might want to do a conditional check to make sure we're not trying to read a buffer with a number instead of a path. And let's make a button. W dot action b dot play. I'm probably gonna mess something up here. I want to make this drag sync a little bit longer and thinner. No errors, so that's good. So let me drag another sound file in here. The trunk slam is fine. Hey! That's fun. And now if I drag another one in, bass drum. It's a very low bass drum. So is that paper rip. Yeah. That's a really quick and dirty way of doing that. So Alan, does that answer your question? Drag sync is basically the object to use if you want to drag and drop something, and then its value becomes the thing that you dragged onto it. You know, whether it's a string from a text object or a number from a knob, and apparently also a string for a sound file or any kind of file that you drag in. So this is some more juicy final project ideas. You can basically make a bunch of buttons and map them to MIDI buttons and basically make a little sampler for yourself. So, you know, you can drag sound files. You can have like 8 drag syncs and 8 buttons and 8 buffers and drag 8 sound files in, and then you can sort of play them with your MIDI controller. That's sort of fun. Very fun. I want to get one more fun sound file in here. A jet whistle. And we can do, I think, is that I guess it's a 2-channel. Is it 2 channels? It is. Rand -12 +12 dot MIDI ratio done action 2 dot play. And then you could do, oh, I know what we could do. We'll do -12 to 12 inf.asStream. Right, so that is now a stream, and we can just say rates.next.MIDI ratio. I lost count. Yeah. Fun. Lots of fun. The possibilities are endless, I'm telling you. Okay. Good question, Alan. Thank you. It's good for me to remind myself how that works as well. Yeah, so drag sync, that's a useful one. Right then, I think I'm going to get out of here. I'll push this up onto YouTube before I go. And I'll see those of you who are taking the class tomorrow at 3. And anyone else out there next week, 8 p.m. US Central Time on Wednesday. So thanks everybody for watching, and see you next time.